Hello, this is Patrick, and my YouTube intro as myself and the Wild Guys show you our canoe trips through Northwest Territories, Yukon, and British Columbia. These are the Wild Guys that was on the Yukon trip with us. We had an agreement with Canada 3000 to fly us up to Whitehorse and get our gear to start our canoe trip. But for those that are driving by vehicle, the maps may be useful. A road trip on Highway 37, the Yukon Highway, a beautiful ride. We got together to start our planning. Some of us have never met before. Okay, they stopped in at Diamond Tooth Gertie's when they got to Dawson City. This is Bill Downey with the bright life jacket on. Every team of canoers needs a Bill Downey because Bill was not just a talker, but a doer. Selecting a well-balanced and a crew that will get along is very important to your planning. Now you can see the crew that I had to put up with for about 2 weeks or more. Dragica has baked us a cake. That will add a few more pounds. In planning, one of the hardest and most important things is getting your weight down right and getting resource material also for your trip so you know where you're at and what you're going to see. We're on our way to Vancouver now to get our plane up to Whitehorse. John and Billy look pretty excited about the trip. This is Glenn in the background. We're just now picking him up in Vancouver. We're now at the Vancouver International Airport, or otherwise known as YVR. From here, we went into the terminal. We contracted ahead to have Canada 3000 take all our gear. We got on Canada 3000 and made our way up to Whitehorse. Okay, let's get out and find that canoe rental place and get our canoes. This is where we rented the canoes when we got to the Yukon, and shuttle our canoes and gear to Upper Lake Lebarge, where we're going to spend the night, but first we're going to cross over to the east side to camp. When in Whitehorse, make sure you go and see the SS Klondike that's been restored, and the tourists are able to go and view it. Our next stop is going to be out at Lake Lebarge, where we're going to be putting our canoes into the water. We'll be camping the first night, so we gotta leave now. We got shuttled out to Lake Lebarge, where we loaded our canoe and went over to the other side, Scow Point. That night, the waves got very high. We would have not been able to go out on the lake. But the next morning after we woke up, with the aid of a horn, which we mysteriously never heard again, the lake was unbelievably calm, and a beaver swam by and said good morning. We got off to an early start and headed down Lake Lebarge, and we encountered later on about a 10-inch chop that we had to plow through all the way down the length of the lake, which was about 50 kilometers, and we made her down to Lower Lebarge. I couldn't help but think of Robert Service. This was his cabin. We visited it when we were in Dawson City after they got done the canoe trip. Robert Service wrote the poem about the cremation of Sam McGee, and the poem was based off a real character who lived in Summerland, and this is where he got married to Ruth. Sam McGee was a road engineer and worked for the District of Summerland. He died at 72 years, and he wasn't cremated. Lake Lebarge is about 2 kilometers wide. But there are areas that go up as wide as 5 kilometers. You many times will get a headwind that's coming up the lake and a chop that you're going to have to break. So don't get caught out in the afternoon in the middle of the lake. You'll have noticed that the lake was very calm though in the morning. So be prepared and take clothing for both warm weather and also cold and wet weather to make your life comfortable. Talking about being comfortable, Mark always took a teepee with him when he ventured out into the woods. That day, we were pretty tired, not much filming. From Whitehorse to Carmacks is about 320 kilometers. The paddle across Lake Lebarge was a tough paddle. We made her down close to Lower Lebarge, and we camped across from Ptarmigan Point. It was strange. The second morning, we didn't get any horn to wake us up. The second night we were close to Lower Lebarge. Then after the breakfast we spent some time just looking around Lower Lebarge. This is some of the old timers, the stampeders that come in before us. And this is some of the buildings and remnants that they left behind. Would cut up to 200 to 300 cords of firewood for the steam wheelers. Not all the workers were gold miners. Many cut wood for the steam wheelers that was going up and down the Yukon. The woodcutters built roads, and they used horses and later trucks to haul the logs. Depletion of the timber stands and a conversion to oil eventually ended this industry. At 40 or 50 below, I'm sure this indoor toilet would be a handy thing to have. Today, the Yukon River is famous to the canoers. They go down and look at all the artifacts and all the history that is there. If you get a chance, this is a trip you will want to take. The kettle is on. Let's have a pot of tea. We did not stay overnight at Lower LaBarge, but we spent a fair amount of time there. And then we went downriver before camping for the night. In Lower LaBarge, there was a lot of these little ground squirrels. They're called Arctic ground squirrels. Interesting characters. Many of the campsites were well looked after, and they had some great facilities. Many of the beds that they had back in the old days, when the time of the gold rush, they weren't exactly Posturepedic. I'm not sure how comfortable they were, but I guess it worked out for them back then. The SS Casca had 3 different hulls. They were in hard use. They just took the machinery and moved it over to a new hull. This is a hull of the SS Casca. It was used as a dock for a while and then got pulled up on shore. This is what's left of it. The last Casca was destroyed in June 1974 by some homeless people while it was dry docked in Whitehorse. Well, it's just about time for us to leave Lower LaBarge and head out on the Yukon River. But what way do we go? Oh, it's that way. Okay. Well, we're just about ready to go over the 30-mile stretch of the Yukon River. That's Glenn Tadson on the left from Victoria. He's our fisherman. He's great at it. Bill got a couple of guidebooks for us. You can order them online. You'll get all the mileage and kilometers you need. They're very helpful, not only as a guide, but to find relics along the river. The Arctic ground squirrel is appropriately named. It does well in the very cold weather, and it tries to tunnel areas where it's not permafrost, and they have a fairly shallow tunnel. Hi, little ground squirrel. Mark has got the blue sleeping bag. Can you sneak into his? But don't go into the red one, because that one's mine. We always want to show respect for the archives that were left behind. We don't want to do any damage to them. There are many more that's going to come behind us to see these. And like I said before, it is much more interesting than going to a museum, to wander around through the various different locations in these sites and see all of the equipment that they used back then. And it certainly brings you a lot closer to the history. Mark is a retired RCMP officer. He is in the stern of the canoe. Mark was an integral part of the Wild Guys canoe team that we had. In respect to Mark, we'll cover some of the Northwest Mounted Police history. This was a residence of the Northwest Mounted Police in Lake LaBarge. We will cover some history of the Northwest Mounted Police during the Klondike days now. And this is William John Duncan Dempster. He gained notice for his involvement in finding the lost patrol, 3 Northwest Mounted Police officers and an ex-Northwest Mounted Police officer who was a guide who disappeared on the trail between Fort McPherson and Dawson City in 1910, around December. They called them Northwest Mounted Police officers, but for the most part they weren't mounted, especially in the wintertime. As you see from the pictures, they had dogs and they were mushers. Things with the RCMP have changed since that day. In 1910, a Northwest Mounted Police mail delivery patrol that was commanded by Inspector Francis Joseph Fitzgerald left Fort McPherson December 21st, 1910, and he had with him Constable George Kinley, Richard Taylor, and a former Constable Samuel Carter as their guide. The trip between Fort McPherson and Dawson City was about 800 kilometers, or 500 miles, and this was through the wilderness, and they never showed up. They were a month overdue, and it was heavy snow and cold weather. Now Corporal Dempster, along with Constable J.F. Five and F. Turner, who was a First Nations guide, Charlie Stewart, went to find them. They soon found there was trouble. They were off the trail, and they seen a number of dog harnesses indicating that they were starving and eating their dogs. Life for the Northwest Mounted Police was not easy back then, but I guess it's not easy for the RCMP today neither. So goes the name for the highway from the Klondike up to Inuvik. It was called the Dempster Highway after Corporal Dempster. The rest of the pictures of the Northwest Mounted Police are taken from the archives to give you an idea what type of life and transportation they had. But I know we're wanting to talk about the Yukon, and so we're going to get back onto the Yukon and carry on down, and you'll see much more. This was an old sloop, and you'd either have it pulled by horses or a tractor, but if you ever hit something like a rock or a stump, or you got it pulled up too steep, you were going over the handlebars. We called it a Fresno. Protect our parks might look like a piece of junk, but it's really history. It's not a ministry that is highly funded. Oh, and I gotta say, I don't work for the parts branch. I just enjoy the facilities they provide for us and all the history we have of those who came before us. So goodbye, Lower LaBarge. We're heading down the Yukon River to see the next historical 30 miles that has so much history in it. We'll talk to you about it as we go along. Some call the Yukon River the greatest river in the world. The Yukon flows from Marsh Lake to the Bering Sea, almost 2,000 kilometers. There's some say that it actually starts before Marsh Lake. Some even go back to the Atlin Lake, to the Bering Sea. But whatever, it covers a big territory. In 1898, during the gold rush, the Yukon had 7,000 boats on it. On our trip across the Lake LaBarge and down the Yukon River, I doubt that we've seen any more than 10 boats coming up to meet us. Things have changed a lot.
There's a valley by the old North Pole where old Sam McGee died in search of gold. Wherever I wander in memory.
Billy, our crew boss, was always talking about Hootalinga and the great time we were going to have. There was supposed to be a great party there that night, but he just made the story up to keep us all excited and looking forward to Hootalinga. I guess we could say that Bill was right. There was a big party in Hootalinga. It was a party by all the mosquitoes and flies that were chewing on us. We didn't stay long. We got out of there pretty fast. But on the river, there was no mosquitoes. Next, we were watching for Big Eddie's Wood Camp. It would be about mile 80, just before the resting place of the SS Klondike on the east side of the river. The SS Klondike is about 99 miles north of Lower LaBarge. It is on the east side of the river, and in high water you may not even be able to see it. Not much left of the hull. The Yukon River, just past Lower LaBarge heading north, is full of history, and now I know why that they declare it a heritage site. The history here is immense. We couldn't even begin to cover it all. There was an awful lot to see in this part of the river. Clouds are overhead and we hear thunder. Could get a storm.
It looks like we got company. We got a power boat coming up.
The local northerners are known to be very friendly. We haven't seen any boats or canoes for a number of days, so this is good.
Well, they're getting a lot closer now. Let's see if they flop the boat over here. We got Bob and Bill and Alan.
It's nice to be alone, but it's also nice to see some people come along.
Oh, you got a dog too.
Even the dogs are greeting us as they're coming by, and so is the operator. Oops, I guess not one boat, but two boats are coming at us. You'll notice they have deep hulls on these power boats, take a lot of weight and also a lot of waves in Lake LaBarge. Well, those noisy boats are gone and back to us in the Yukon River. Well, we meet our first wilderness paddler. The Yukon is sparsely populated and largely unspoiled wilderness area. On a trip like this, you want to make sure that you are looking after your health. Good water is important. Purify it or boil it. No point sitting on some Parks Brant toilet all day. Or worse yet, sitting on a log in the bush with the mosquitoes eating on you. Many places on the Yukon River, we would camp on an island. We figured it would help us as regards to getting the mosquitoes away because of the breeze, and also to get away from the grizzlies. Well, it did help us with the mosquitoes, okay. But the grizzlies had the same idea as us, and so we met on the island. Boy, we seen lots of sign of grizzlies on the island, and some of them weren't very big islands neither. This fella watched us pretty close. Then there was the black bear as well, but was friendly. You leave the river and wander into the woods with your TP and stir up the ground. The mosquitoes are going to be coming after you full force, and you're going to be running out of that bush pretty fast, pulling up your pants, and just heading for the open area where the wind will help to blow them away. The Yukon is home to grizzly bears and hungry black bears eating the berries, dull sheep, large moose, and other furry animals. Well, they got some quills as well as fur. They also had the birds with feathers. We got an eagle here. We've seen lots of eagles, but the ones that you want to watch out for are the Arctic terns. They can dive bomb on you and poop right on your head. Mark can verify that. They hit them dead on. There is Arctic grayling, lake trout, and northern pike there. Oh, and I don't want to forget the salmon runs as well. Well, there's a few salmon hanging on that brack, I'd say.
Well, we landed. The water was fast, hit a few rapids, and had some excitement, a lot of fun. But everything is fine, and we're just stopping for a bit. I don't know whether we're going to have a sandwich or not.
We stopped on a number of the islands, and this is an island that we stopped at for a short time before we entered Hootalinga. That was fast. We're in Hootalinga already. Next you'll see Glenn Tadson, our fisherman, just coming out of the John, checking it out. Next you'll see Bob McFarland. You want to be in his canoe. He's a strong paddler. One of the wild guys had to tie a rock to the back of his canoe just to slow him down. That's Bob McFarland there on the picnic table. He also had John Waters with him, another strong paddler. When you've got beautiful running water right out of the Yukon, you can't pass it by. That's the time to get all shined up. And really, the color of the water didn't change a whole lot. Billy had us all excited about Hootalinga. Now, we didn't get to that party, but we did get to travel and look around Hootalinga. Very interesting place with a lot of great history. So we stayed here and looked around for a while before we headed out. Even though we're going to be moving on this afternoon, you're going to hear a lot more about Hootalinga. There's so much from the days gone by that we could have stayed for a lot longer. It had a great deal of history during the Klondike Gold Rush days, but not only then, but for many years after as well. Billy had us all excited about a big party in Hootalinga, but we didn't know that the party was for the mosquitoes. The stories you read from the old-time prospectors is more about the mosquitoes than the wind and the 60 below weather. Not to mention those that died from starvation. Anyway, it's time to move on from Hootalinga. This is where the Teslin River joins the Yukon. Then another 500 meters down from Hootalinga is the Shipyard Island. To the right of the island lies a wreck of the paddle wheeler steamer Evelyn. And then on the island, if you look around, you'll find probably parts of a lot of other paddle wheeler steamers. We thought there was a lot greater chance to get eaten by the mosquitoes than the grizzly bears. I think Hootalinga was a capital city off the Yukon for mosquitoes. Let's get out of here and get on the island where the wind is blowing. That feels better. The mosquitoes are gone. But what have we got now? Many Yukoners died from drowning and others from freezing in the wintertime. But starvation was a big one. For many, it wasn't an easy life up in the Yukon. We've now moved down to the island, and the tents are all set up ready for the night. 2/3 of the total population of the Yukon lives in Whitehorse. By what I see in the camera lens, I better shut this down pretty quick, or else I could be missing out. You probably noticed before starting out that we weighed everything we had. Hey, I think I see my teacher. I have to get over there pretty quick, so we don't take a lot of liquor along with us because it's very heavy. But we do have the odd one. We didn't come out here for a wild party. We come out to enjoy all the history and beauty that we have in our back 40. Well, we'll soon be going to bed. But before we do, we'll take one last look at the river, and also we'll give you a little more history. Nearly all the fuel, the food, the building material is transported over a considerable distance, so that means the cost is very high. Those that work for the public sector or with the mining or transportation, they seem to do okay. But those with little or no employment, it's very difficult. Commercial logging takes place only really in the southern areas. They have small mills and produce lumber for the local economy and for some of the mines as regards to timber. The fuel is coming in and being imported there and replacing both wood and some of the coal that they were getting locally. Well, it's time to go to bed. Good night. Hey, quiet over there, eh? Some of the wild guys were pretty loud snorers, but I was a quiet one. Never heard myself snore once. Today we'll be watching out for the SS Klondike, where it rests on the shore. In 1936, the Klondike sank. It was on its way to Dawson City, a full load of cargo, 40 passengers, horses and cows. The passengers all survived. They got the horses off too, but the cows weren't as lucky. They lost a lot of cargo as well. Just getting things cleaned up and ready for a new day. You want to look after your gear and keep it dry. Make sure you pick up all your camping gear from your camping spot before taking off and going down the river, only to find out you left some behind. Well, the third day's gone by, and we're starting the fourth day today.
We're just floating down. We're looking for the wreck of the Klondike.
The Yukon's revenue comes principally from financial transfer payments from the federal government. The territorial taxes also help as regards to the source of income that they have. Oh, hi, Bob. The White Pass Yukon Route Railroad suspended operations in 1982. They carried freight and passengers between Whitehorse and Skagway. The telegraph line shut down in 1936 and was replaced by shortwave radio communications. After that, and right now at present, we have the internet services, a mobile wireless connections. I was too busy talking. I just missed a black bear there. We couldn't 100% verify that we seen the SS Klondike, but on high water, it's not visible. There's still the remains of many of the cabins of those who were here before us that you were able to see. Some we missed. We sailed right by. Oh, we're at Big Salmon. We'll have to look at this one. Lots of log homes here, and they're deteriorating, so they won't be here that long. We are just providing some information to the parks officer. I know I've said it before, but we certainly appreciate the Parks Branch. We know the history and everything that's here, and some of it's deteriorating away. It would be nice, and when you see where we're spending our money, it'd be nice to see some of that go towards the parks and the preservation of the history. I hope I don't sound political. It would just be nice to have some of this history, not only for us, but for those who come after us. Big Salmon Village was one of the gold rush trading posts, and the Big Salmon River is one of the greatest rivers to canoe, but we didn't have time, so we had to sail by it. Big Salmon River swings east. The village of Big Salmon is actually abandoned now. Nothing there except the old buildings. To the village of Carmacks, just a few miles from Carmacks, on the Klondike Highway. These two ladies we met were from Germany, that's doing this wilderness tour. Too bad we didn't see more of our Canadians out in our wilderness. The Yukon River is home to one of the largest salmon run in the world. We are so pleased to have been able to do this trip, but it would have been nice if we could have did some of the other rivers like the Big Salmon River. We have many more places to go and to canoe and places to see, and our expiry date is getting close. So we don't know how many more we're going to see, but this is big salmon that we're paddling by right now. It looks like a beautiful river to travel up, but we can't do it this trip. We didn't see that many moose, but there's lots here. Great looking river. Big Salmon was a gold rush trading post. You've just seen quite a bit of fireweed, and fires play an important role in the rejuvenation of the Yukon's forests and keeping them healthy, not to mention for the mushroom pickers and the morel mushrooms. Just want to show you this, John. Hey, John, where are you off to?
That'll do. Okay. Notice they got dirt roofs on those cabins.
It could be that they started out as moss. They just look that way now.
Well, Bill's just wandering around looking at various different things. Hey, there's Glenn. Hi, Glenn.
I grew up by Lesser Slave Lake, eating wild strawberries and cream. There's nothing better. This is going to be a good one. Get all lined up. Okay, ready just about?
Just a sec here. Yeah. Mosquito bop. Hi, hi.
Ouch! Just got stung by a bloody bee. If you get stung by a bee, cut an onion in half and place it over the sting. Those wild guys got quite a chuckle out of that bee sting, all right. Big Salmon Village had a lot for us to see, and we could have spent more time there, but we got to move on. Here you're going to see some more of the area that was burnt. You're going to see fireweed there. Probably mushroom pickers, professional ones, will be coming in. They do quite well at picking mushrooms. The First Nations also pick mushrooms for our food source as well. There are steep side hills, so the mushroom pickers have to work very hard. The next two spots we will see will be Twin Creeks, then Little Salmon, then it would be Carmacks Airport, Tantalus Butte, and then Carmacks. This fireweed is from Little Salmon. Then down the river a little further, Five Fingers. In our urban centers, we all feel that fire is really bad because we have homes and so forth up against the timber. But when I was in Alaska going through the Denali Park, if they have a fire, they leave it alone. It's natural, it burns out, and it leaves organic matter and certainly makes the forest healthy. I'm glad it's the wild animals walking through this woods because it would be pretty hard for me to get through there. But from the canoe, it looks good. Well, in about the month of June, there should have been a lot of morel mushrooms after that fire. It was quite a big fire that come through the Yukon. Lightning caused most of the Yukon big fires. During the short summers in the Yukon, things really grow.
Well, this is the old gold dredge. Pretty tough shape right now.
Searle's Dredge. It was built in 1940 by Lawrence Searle and Boyd Gordon. It operated for 23 days, and it brought in a total revenue of $2,000. Cost them $10,000 to build, though.
Well, I didn't get a shot of our camp on the fourth day. It was raining, first rain, but it quit by the time we got up.
This is our fifth day. On October 5th, 1920, about a half a mile up above the Stewart River, the Selkirk steamwheeler hit a rock, so the rock is called Selkirk Rock. This meant a loss of the fastest steamwheeler on the Yukon River. Okay, back to our trip down the Yukon.
Okay, and we're heading for Little Salmon, and then we're heading for Carmack.
Little Salmon had lots of fireweed, just as much as Big Salmon.
I'll just suck these guys in a little closer. This is Little Salmon. There's a cemetery here.
It was nice to see the cemetery on Little Salmon was well looked after, and certainly they showed respect for those before them. The vegetation here grows fairly rapidly, so it will be something that would have to be maintained quite regularly. This is believed to be one of the oldest known permanent Indian settlements on the upper Yukon River. Originally, the village was on the other side of the river, but there was a flu epidemic which virtually wiped out all of the population in 1917. This is John Waters. John was involved in a lot of the planning of our trips. Plus, he was able to call in the loons and make a great show for us. Plus, many of his musical interludes entertained us. The Yukon River is one of the grandest in the world. It flows almost 2,000 miles from Marsh Lake to the Bering Sea. One of the gems in the entire Yukon River system, a section only 30 miles long, is now Canadian Heritage River. There are 3 more series of the Wild Guys on the Yukon River. But not just the Yukon, but many other rivers throughout British Columbia and the Northwest Territories. Watch for these. You are invited to come along on our next canoe trip with our next YouTube video.
There's a valley by the old North Pole where old Sam McGee died in search of gold. Wherever I wander in memories, I see the smoke from the pipe of Sam McGee.
He sees the smoke from the pipe of Sam McGee.
We had wandered